You're on today, Bobby from Henderson, Nevada. So, wow, lots of family in the house. I'm really excited about that. And my mom is there with Beverly. So, uh, Mommy doll, you got a whole bunch of your kids here today. Anyway, Catherine has been sharing her unique ability to communicate and to dialogue with God and with the deceased and coma patients for decades. She writes the conversations as they occur, calling them writings, and she's grateful to serve others by facilitating the transmission of spirit, wisdom, and healing energy. And I just think it's really timely for us to have Catherine's voice in this moment. You'll remember, many of you, last week I asked, do you believe your own story? Who believes your story? And you start, because there's some unbelievable things that have happened in your experience, and this is to affirm the reality and legitimacy of all of this. Catherine writes the dialogues longhand as they occur, and she calls them writings. And when asked to explain her gift, Catherine says, I believe God and those we love are always in our midst. And there is a God, a source consciousness, a stream of love that runs within all of us. And this is so consistent with indigenous theologies. This is part of the African experience that our ancestors are here in God's presence with us. And Catherine says, I happen to be able to connect and transform this flow into words that all of us can understand. This energy she likes to refer to as a love stream. And she's been the prayer chaplain at Unity of Santa Barbara for almost 20 years. And can we just give a great big thank you to Catherine for being with us today? Yeah.
Well, thank you. Should I take the wheel? Jesus, take the wheel. Jesus.
You've got it.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to speak to you. It's always quite interesting to see how I'm going to be introduced. So my talk today is connected by God and love. And as Pastor Moore said, that is really my work in the world. And really, it's about grace and wonder always on the periphery. And so Pastor's been talking to us about Hagar's story, and we've been digging deep into that the last couple of weeks. So I don't know if he was leading up to me, because he said you could talk about whatever you wanted, but I'm just like, okay. So, the legitimacy of our story. Do you believe your own story? I'm like, okay, let's just take the beloved community off the high dive here. And so like Hagar, and all of us, we each have this unique experience and are connected to God. And for some of us, as Pastor Moore was talking about, we are, well, not for some of us, we all are seen and loved by God, but for us to open our eyes to see that God is right there with us is sometimes challenging, even for someone like myself who's been doing the kind of work, and God keeps saying, girl, you want to see a bigger God? I'm just going to keep showing you a bigger God. So that is what I'm going to share with you today, is one of many, many, many experiences. And when I decided on this talk, Jacob's mother was still with us. So Jacob, my deepest condolences for the loss of your mother. And I just want to say we are going down that grief lane today. So I'm starting off with a few premises, which, feel free to go like, this is all hooey. Yeah, I'm not legitimizing this story, girl. But one of the main premises is that everything is energy. Everything has spirit, our animals, our plants, our planet, our earth, us. So everything is energy. And I believe, it is my belief, that we are designed by God by and for love. That, I, during the pandemic, was with you all the time till I went back in person at Unity. So I know that I am in a group that believes that as well. And that love is bigger than we know, or than the literal realities or the ways we're taught to believe. So, as Pastor Moore said, I have the ability to connect through different realms. I have been doing this work for over 30 years. This was something that I did not expect to happen. I was never think that God doesn't have a great sense of humor, because I was a graduate student at UCSB studying communication. And God said, you want an advanced degree in communication? You want to learn about communication? I'm going to show you and make your life's work something that the university can't teach you. And I've not got time to go into that story, but it was very disarming and alarming at the time. So, like the story of Hagar we've been hearing, in our lives, in each of our lives, we suffer a lot of loss and pain and grief. And this is part of the human experience. It is something that we all go through. And today I'm going to share with you a very personal story of a loss that I endured, and the way that God showed up around that. So even in our loss or our challenges, love and gratitude persists. So also this idea that there is so much to be grateful for, and that we're always connected by love, whether we're asleep and dreaming or we're in the afterlife. Love and gratitude is just the glue that holds it all together. So I'm going to share with you this story, and it's a story that I had originally titled Shelley's story, but it's my Shelley story, because, as Pastor Moore said, who's doing the narrative here, right? So Shelley was my sister-in-law. She was the sister God gave me that I never had. And she was a State Farm insurance rep, adjuster. You might, in this area, you might have even dealt with her years ago. And in 2004, she was diagnosed with lung cancer. And she had a lobectomy. She went through chemo and radiation, and she fought it, desperately fought it. And one of her greatest fears was losing her job. She was a single woman. She did not have children. She lived in Solvay, commuted to Santa Barbara. And for her job loss was more important than her life. All she focused it on was, I got to get well so I can keep my job. I got to get well so I can keep my job. Reasonable and understandable. And I don't know if many of you have dealt with oncologists, hopefully not very often, but they have trouble leveling with people sometimes. And Shelley refused to go on disability, and she was just killing herself, quite literally. The cancer was killing her, but she also was having all kinds of challenges. So she was so bound and determined, even after she could barely walk and move around. And she said, I have to go get a rolling black backpack because I'm not going to be able to lift my laptop and my computer for work. Please take me shopping. I was like, oh my gosh, really? How far is this going? So I took her and she found a rolling backpack. And so she was set, but obviously she was deteriorating. And the oncologist finally said, you know, Shelley, we've reached the end of anything we can do for you. The treatments aren't working. And sadly, you know, this is it. But before that happened, before they had that conversation, I did one of those writings. And, you know, I think I moved the slides. This is what a writing looks like, by the way. I decided to move it. So it's just a handwritten thing that I do. I don't go anywhere. It's not woo-wooey. It's just like I'm talking to you right now. But I did a writing for Shelley. And these are just a few excerpts of what it was a God writing, what God was saying in it that I think has some wisdom to all of us. And she said, am I dying? And God said, the question should never be, am I dying? It should always be, am I living? Put the word living into your perspective, vocabulary, and mindset. Living is not a word of endings. It's about engaging your choices and being fed rather than starved so you can survive. And, you know, those of us that are involved in social justice knows how much you work for the survival of people. Hagar was a slave, right? Another excerpt was, see the rainbow. No, it doesn't dwell beyond you, but is created through your own willingness to illuminate yourself by living. Ask yourself, how am I living? How do I choose life today? Where is the beauty? List it. What gratefulness do I feel and for what? What can I give? Choose living. Give yourself permission to be joyful and celebrate. So you have to understand she just was beating herself up. She was a smoker, so she had guilt that she gave herself the cancer, all kinds of stuff. Let the heart songs be heard so they can be given to the living. Become a joy crusader, shy, convert, or otherwise. Dispense with old doctrines of fear and survival that only enslave you. Be an angel to yourself. So those are just a few excerpts. So Shelley was given this reality that, you know, sadly, this was the end. And it was Shelley's desire to die at home with us. My husband and my daughter was 8 at the time, to be at our house. And this is what we could do for her. And this is what love was. And my friends just judged me horribly that I was going to let my daughter witness the death of my sister-in-law in our guest room and care for her in the last, what turned out to be the last 4 weeks of her life. So the last place that Shelley was out in the world was when we went, her mother said, well, we have to buy cemetery plots. Now, her mother was very excited that she was going to finally get her daughter close and near to her. Any of you avoiding your mother? Well, this is Shelley. She avoided her mother at all costs. So her mother was really gleeful in a perverse kind of way that she could have Shelley right there with her for all eternity in the ground. So we went out and they picked out the plots at Santa Barbara Cemetery. And the last place that Shelley was in the world was at La Casa de Maria, a very near and dear place to me. And Shelley was so weak, she couldn't walk around or anything. She said, I parked by the sculpture, and you'll notice this sculpture and that it's called Transformation Through Forgiveness. It has got a very Native American vibe. As you can see, Shelley's sculpture she sculpted 5 years before, which we all in the family said, wow, this looks like a self-portrait. She sat on there while Stella, my mother-in-law, and I walked around. But this was the last place that Shelley was out in the world. And then we came home and got in the hospital bed, and her death journey commenced. And I said it was 4 weeks. It wasn't. Probably 2 weeks once she actually came. She stayed at her house before we got the hospital bed, but doesn't matter. And during that time, I had a Papillon dog, and the dog would sit on the bed with her, and it was sitting sentinel. It was with her, and anyhow, and she would talk. You know how, I don't know if you've ever been with someone who is going in and out of consciousness, but towards the end, that is not uncommon for what happens. And she would say, no, no, it's not my dog, it's their dog. So clearly she was being visited by ancestors, spirits, angels, God. I don't know, but she was actually having these sorts of interactions. She was not alone in her death at all. And Shelley was fighting death. While she was conscious, she was fighting it. I don't want pain medication, so she was suffering terribly. And I used to say to her, Shelley, I don't think death has to be this hard. I deal with a lot of people who have died, and you're really going to a wonderful place. But please, and so I would say it's like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She went all around everywhere looking for the magic thing, and in the end, it was right inside her. God is waiting there. So I would hold her hand and I'd say, repeat after me. There's no place like home. And we would almost chant, there's no place like home. There's no place like home, together. And it seemed to calm her. So Shelley was really fighting death. My sister-in-law was a hospice nurse. She came and helped us, and she could not get Shelley's pain under control. She was losing her mind. She felt like, I deal with people and I can't help my own sister-in-law. So it became so apparent to me that I needed big energy, some kind of energy. I mean, I was on prayer. I had prayers going. I was praying. Everybody was praying. And Shelley just wasn't going. She was just holding on. And I know everything is in God's time. So I called a friend who had this, as you see the slide, is Buddha Girl. It's a friend of mine's sculpture. It is an antiquity. It is amazing. And I believe this is a Kuan Yin, is very, very, very powerful. So I called my friend and said, can I borrow a Buddha Girl? Shelley's not going, and I need some bigger backup. We need some support here. Now, I would barely ask to borrow your car or something, much less your antiquity, but I was so desperate. And so I left her a message. She didn't call me back. I called another friend. I said, I need Buddha Girl. And so she said, well, she's in New York. I'll get a hold of her. So I didn't know. That's where I left it. That was the end of it. And the pain got so extreme in the end, and Shelley was having such difficulty that I knew that I couldn't bring my daughter home to see that. Up until then, it had been okay. So I picked my daughter up from soccer practice, and we went to my aunt's house. And I arrived at my aunt's house in Montecito, and my cell phone beeped in, and it was my friend that I've been trying to get Buddha Girl from, saying, I got your message and I'm having my assistant deliver Buddha Girl to your house right now. And I'm on the phone with her, and as I'm on the phone with her, I get another beep in, call waiting, and I take it, and it's my friend, my best friend, who just happened to be visiting from Florida at a conference for 2 days, that was there on this day. So she was at my house with Shelley and her brothers and my sister-in-law, and it was her. And she said, I'm calling to tell you Shelley just passed. And as she passed, as she took her last breath, there was knocking at the door, and it was Sherry delivering Buddha Girl. We've placed it at the end of the bed till so that was the first amazing well, there were lots of amazing things, but that is one of the signs that the unbelievable, even in the unbelievable world that I know is true, this happened. And then, though Shelley was gone from sight and our loved ones are gone from sight, they are sending us signs. And I wrote a book with a client of mine, and so many people came up afterwards and shared their experience of their loved one being gone and sensing them or feeling them, or a phone. I mean, you perhaps had these experiences or heard of them. So for me, this was one I want to share with you. When I got off the phone with my aunt, with the phone call that Shelley had passed, and I was off the phone with my friend, I told my aunt, Shelley's gone. And I was so relieved, as those of you who have attended your loved one's death, there's this grief, but there's also such relief that they're at peace and they're at home now and they're out of their suffering. So my aunt said, "Oh, go in the kitchen. I have a gift for you." And I said, "Really? Okay." And I walked in there, and on her table was a beautiful gold box with a beautiful gold bow. And I went and opened it, and this is what was inside the box. Now, granted, they are not Dorothy's ruby red slippers, but they are red slippers. They are beautiful, custom, gorgeous, soft, plush, artistic red slippers. And I just said, "Thank you, God," right? Where's that well that's next? Oh my gosh, is that sign. And then there's one other sign I want to share with you. And about a month after Shelley died, I was back at La Casa de Maria, which is a retreat house, and sadly got mudslided at a retreat, and a day retreat. And I don't even remember what the title of the retreat was, but the facilitator who asked us to go outside and walk in nature and let an item speak to us. Maybe many of you have ever done this, and so I was walking around the La Casa property, and I came to transformation of forgiveness, and I noticed something was at the base of it. And I picked it up, and the picture is the actual thing that was laying on the base of transformation and forgiveness. Admit one. So I just knew, like, okay, Shelley got the ticket. She's home. She got admitted to go, she made it. She got the ticket. Here's her ticket stub. And by the way, that sculpture, and Shelley's sculpture, she did that sculpture 5 years before she died. And how would she have known that the last place she would ever walk before she came home and got on the hospital bed would be at La Casa, to sit there? So God and this love and our ancestors and all our guardian angels, in whatever way you think of those, they do send us messages, I believe. And remember that backpack, that one I took, a frail, last of her moment energy with Shelley to go and find, because she was going to go back to work. Well, she never used the backpack, but her niece, my daughter, who she loved deeply, took that backpack. That backpack went with my daughter, Caitlin, on a trip to Nicaragua, to Kids Helping Kids in Nicaragua. That backpack she took she's a soccer player, my daughter. She took to Vancouver and to France to watch the women's soccer team win the World Cup. That backpack she took for a semester abroad in Barcelona. And then that backpack she took as she went around Europe afterwards. So Shelley never got to use that backpack, but that backpack that Shelley had all her hopes and dreams in for her to return to work that never came to fruition, went on to be a vessel for my daughter to have her adventures and live out her dreams and to be of service. So, like Hagar, was shown at the well. God shows us the way. And also, our soul knows the way. I believe that for sure, because I believe in Jesus, I believe in God, and I see this and have seen this over the many decades so often with strangers that I know nothing about, and can connect with spirit and bring about these messages for people. So Shelley's soul knows the way, as our own souls know the way. And our spirits are eternal in God. I know that to be true. I live that way, and I see this is one of probably 1,000 stories of how I know that God is there. God's love is the compass. And I think that's what we know.
Thank you.
That we who are on here know that it is God's love, and us being like Hagar, willing to open our eyes and see and sense through that God in us, that spirit, to direct and discern our actions and our activities.
Thank you, Catherine.
Huh?
I was just saying thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
It's past 11, so we want to move to the conversation period.
Okay, I'll just go really quickly. This is what I want to leave us with.
All right, thank you.
God invites us to open ourselves with the eyes of our hearts and souls. So what is our story? Where is the well God has placed for you? It's there in our lives, in our daily lives. And to remember that God's grace and wonder are always nearby, often on the periphery. We have to look to find them. We have to soften our gaze and be the open palm. And the message is, say yes to God and open the portal of our heart. That's what I believe we're called to do. That's what I think Hagar did. And God is the answer. God does answer. So I'll stop my share.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll get us kicked off here for the conversation. Thank you for sharing, Catherine. And I know it's always very moving and emotional to hear what's going on in people's lives or what has been so important. I think the personal journey always makes the message resonate so much more. As you were talking, I was reminded of just something that's been present for me this weekend. It's the 3-year anniversary of my dad passing away. He had early onset Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And 3 years ago, it was middle of COVID, and we got a call, just a few, kind of unexpectedly, that he'd taken a very sudden turn we didn't expect. And I was told I wasn't probably even going to make it down to LA in 2 hours. And I panicked and got in my car, just no bag, no nothing, just trying to make it down there. And one of the signs that came up for me in that very urgent moment was I put on a artist that he loved on my drive down, because I was like, it's going to take me 2 hours no matter what. And it was a Roy Orbison song, and there's some lyrics that came on that I wanted to share that I thought would be interesting to reflect on is something that would be interesting to reflect on in our conversation, which was the lyrics. Just briefly go, in dreams we do so many things. We set aside the rules we know and fly the world so high in great and shining rings. If only we could always live in dreams. If only we could make of life what in dreams it seems. But in the real world, we must say real goodbyes. No matter if the love will live, it will never die. I think that's a lot of the signs that you shared about the journey with your sister-in-law reminded me of some signs I know I've received. And I'm sure many people here may want to share what that has meant to them, where their well has been in those moments.
Beautiful.
I think part that stuck to me is the beginning. You said the question is not are we dying, but are we living? And it reminded me of the Howard Thurman quote that says, don't ask yourself, or don't ask what the world needs, but ask yourself what makes you come alive, and do that to the fullest, because what the world needs is humans fully alive. And I think the perspective on death positivity, I guess, if you want to name it that, or just grief and, acceptance, is a beautiful way of understanding the life rhythms of life, of death, life, and how we fit into those, and how we understand our bodies in this world, and the joy that is withheld in them, and the power that is held within them. And I think understanding the sensitivities of that go on in that transitional period is just, I've heard so many stories. I really see what you're saying to us today as some keys on really how to live, how to find that well, like Hagar found. She had to let some things die. She had to come to acceptance of some things. And so thank you for sharing your gifts with us today. I'd like to open it up to anybody else with
Clint and Julia have their hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Clint, Julia.
Hello. Thank you so much, Catherine. I love this. It rings true. And Pastor Moore was with me when my mom passed away. I was holding her hand. We were laughing. We were sharing memories. It was probably the most joyful passing, but the fact is there was signs afterward of the presence. And I'm a big believer in Native American beliefs. And the fact is you never truly die. That isn't, you transform, but that energy is something inherent, and that is the divine. And we have little signs in our own home of things that happen. I know people will think this is crazy. We put our ambiance on every evening to get the feng shui, you know what I mean? Well, for a while we had a helper. We have this little light over here, and it's not plugged into the wall. It is an actual thing you have to do a switch with, and it would go on its own numerous times. And I always laugh and say, that's either her grandma or my mom trying to help out with the ambiance in the house. And and we love that spiritual openness is great. And I just want to thank you for sharing that.
I wanted to quickly share. I'm sorry, Catherine, that was amazing. That was amazing. And I am just tickled. I'm tickled pink. And I'm thinking to myself, you have to see. It's just a matter of, it's all there happening all around you at all times. And that reminds me of the bondage of self. If you're so wrapped up in what's going on with you and your life and your pain, you're not going to be able to share your, to be useful to others the way God needs us to be with our strengths and the things that we offer. And I love how, we're the same way. Like he said, I notice things because my eyes are open and I'm listening. I'm looking for messages and signs to help direct my path, and the fact that you're able to see so many wonderful signs. You take things that might be painful and turn them into something that's not just tolerable, but like you see the lesson, you see what we're supposed to be getting out of it. So that was just great. I really enjoyed everything you said. And thank you so much for sharing.
And we're always, I'm learning, that's the dynamic God. That is divinity. That's discernment. That this dance of soul and Christ and us, we're the hands and feet. And I always wake up every morning saying, your will, God, because I know who I'm working for. I mean, I know who I'm here for. And then I just open it up and I'm off the grid. Well, I wrote the book, so I'm on the grid, and I'm in Kim Canton's book, so I'm back on the grid. But God, I don't have to tell all of you, God is amazing and brings us the right person or the opportunity that we can be of service. So, and I'm constantly, it's an ever, even with all of that, it's always a like, really, God, you want me to, okay, all right, I'm on trust. Talk about having faith. I need a fanny pack. Like, let me just, I don't know if I can do that. Courage. So anyway, talking to all of you took some courage. I'm like, are they really gonna all right, let's tee up the most unbelievable story. And so thank you for for responding.
Michael, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. I think probably a lot of you remember this last week, a year ago, this last week, within 6 days of each other, my brother and sister-in-law died. This was a hard time, and this is a good time for me to share. It's very opportune. It's a good time for me to share. Some of you know already, but 2 weeks ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And it was pretty frightening at first. And I talked to David. I called David and texted him, and one of David's replies was, "Take heart, my friend. Good things are ahead for you." And they were. Gosh, they were. Many, many things, and just a couple of them. Lynette, many of you who are friends know that Lynette and I had a doctor for over 20 years who was very dear to us. And at the very beginning of COVID, he got severely ill, had to close his practice, had to sell his property to pay his medical bills, ironically, and moved to Tennessee where they could afford to live. Once a month or so, he and I would text. He was more than a doctor. We ended up being really good friends. But so I texted him to ask him a couple of things about the treatment options that I'd been given. And he phoned me back immediately. And I just felt so much love. And we talked for almost 2 hours on the phone. And he just said to me, don't take those two options. He said, and my cancer is the prostate cancer. And he said, the choices were radiation or surgery. And my urologist said neither of them were good choice. They were the best choices, but that's what it was. And this doctor friend said, nope. And he had many objections to the radiation that would be available here. Anyway, long story short, he recommended a proton beam therapy center in San Diego, UC San Diego. And right away, that means Lene and I have to move. If I do this, it's going to be months of treatment, and it's every day. So I'm trying to keep this short, but it's going to be quite a process to get accepted into the place and everything. But I started right away, and it's only 2 weeks since my diagnosis. But last Monday, they called and I had finished steps 1 through 3. And they asked me to sign a release for them to get the records from my doctors here. And I said, okay, but you have to know that my urologist is not going to, he's a fantastic doctor, but their office is really poor and it takes weeks and weeks to get stuff. And she said, well, we deal with that. But anyway, 3 days later, in the middle of this next week, 3 days, they called in and said, we've got it all. We're ready, and you can have your consultation and your treatment plan on the 14th of this month. So that's just a miracle, the speed that this is going. And my family's come forward. We're going to have to rent some place to live in San Diego for a couple of months. My family's got the money together for us. So, yeah, Pastor David, good things are ahead for me. And Lene and I are experiencing them every day. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Michael. Anybody else have questions or comments?
Let me just say that, when I talked to Catherine a couple of weeks ago, she asked, well, which story should I tell? And I said, well, I don't know. That's up to you. And I knew that she would tell a story that would not be all that, not that not bizarre to us because we're humans and we've all had experiences that, in a way, just beyond the rational, super rational experience. And we could be on this Zoom for hours. And so I want to thank Catherine for just kind of giving release to the legitimacy and the remembering of these things and how they empower us, how they uplift us, and how they help us in grief. And I thought about, in particular, one of Dr. Dave's experiences that we've revisited a few times. I know that everybody, could share something, but I ask if you would just take a moment and share this story for us, with us, David.
Yeah, I've never told this story in public, and I have told it very few times. And I always get extremely emotional, so I'll try to keep that in check. When I used to live on Easy Street, had a beautiful home, great job, beautiful wife, and I always said I was blessed with the cutest, sweetest, smartest little girl in the world. But my wife went into one of those postpartum depressions. I mean, she was thinking of drowning our baby or putting her in the oven, that kind of thing. It was horrible. But the main symptom was intense, unrelenting, I have to say, vicious hatred towards me. I mean, you could just cut the air between us. And I was just barely holding on by my fingertips in that house. For me, divorce was a very foreign concept, and I didn't want any parts of it. But I could just barely hang on. Life had really become frightening. I could just, it was so bad. I felt like, I could wake up with a knife in my neck or that kind of thing, or an axe in my head. And she threw me out of the house unexpectedly. We had a Christmas party she said she was going to go to with me, and I was surprised because, I mean, she wouldn't give me the time of day, but instead what she did was she took out a restraining order with no provisions for me to see our daughter, who was 1 year old at the time. And through some grace and machinations, about 10 o'clock that night that happened, I mean, I became homeless. I couch surfed for a while, but arrangements were made for me to see my daughter the next day, but I wasn't allowed inside of the house. So my cousin picked her up, my daughter up, and brought her to me, and I got to spend a few hours with her. And at the end of those few hours, my cousin brought her back to the house, and I was in the car, and I completely fell apart. I had no idea such a thing could happen. If you had told me that such a thing could happen, I would not have believed you. But I just completely fell apart. I wept inconsolably. I was doing home care at the time, and we had hired a new nurse, and she and I went out for coffee after meeting in a patient's home. And shortly after, a few days after this happened, it was a Friday, I think it was the following Tuesday, I met in court to hammer out a separation agreement. And while I was there, the phone rang, and it was this nurse, and she said, I was concerned about you because I dreamed that you were in a car weeping. And she'd had the dream the day that happened. And it was the darkest, lowest moment of my life. I just felt like my guts had been ripped out. But this was such a ray of light, and I felt like, I was being watched over, I was being cared for, and yeah, things have worked out very well. I prayed so hard that my family would come back together, and eventually it actually did. Took a long time, but my daughter and I are very, very close, and yeah, so
And she's how old now, Mariko?
She's 31 now.
So, yeah. David, you were seen.
Amen.
You were seen. The God who sees you, and may we all be, energized by that reality that Matt said earlier, that Hagar had to let a lot of things die. A lot of dreams died, and that's kind of what you're articulating, that you were in your car crying because that's not what you were expecting, and dreams died that in that season of your life. And I'm sure that we could talk about this. I mean, instead of just saying, buck up and that kind of thing, there's the reality that all of us have been redirected, because something has died, and Jacob is on, and he he did not expect. I mean, his mom was sick just for a few days. It was unanticipated. So this is the place that, in a graphic manner, that is a reality for him and for those of us in New Judith. Well, anyway, yes. Can we all say thank you to Catherine for bringing us into this moment?
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Pastor Moore, for making me be courageous and tell my story.
Yeah, I think we'll probably end up doing something like this again. But yeah, we're going longer than usual. And so we're going to let Kenichi take us home.
Wow. Woo. I know that every one of us have a unique story. The main thing, I guess, as I was listening to these strands of narrative, I wanted us to, I guess, hone in on the fact that as we take the broken body of Christ and his shed blood, that is a reminder for us that we are seen. And just to think that even Jesus the Christ, basically when he said, my God, have you forsaken me? It's like, am I seen by you? I'm going, as a human, that's just a real human emotion. And I think that's part of the connection that we all share and that we can relate. And then, as going off on Matt's theme of that letting go, he let go of everything. But yet, resurrection was around the corner. The well was around the corner. So all of us have hope that this is not the end. I remember when my mom was passing from lung cancer, I said to Mom, I'm going to see you again because you're going to come back to this world and we're going to see each other again. I remember saying that over and over. And so thank you, Catherine. Thank you all. My goodness. So with that, let's take the elements with hope in our hearts the broken body of Christ. Let's partake. And the blood of Christ shed for us. Thank you, God. Amen.
Amen.